The Uncharted trilogy was some of the best games I played on the PS3 back when they came out. Everything from the dialogue to the music and the set pieces was just something else. I know a million other people have said this already, but it felt like I was playing an action-filled Hollywood blockbuster. Not since playing Prince of Persia: Sands of Time did I get to hear dialogue between characters during gameplay sound so entertaining and engaging, but Naughty Dog took it to a whole other level. It's actually one of those instances where I played the sequel before the original, so I knew I had to go back. When I found out one of my friends had the game, I quickly asked to borrow it, and man, I regretted playing the sequel first. Instantly. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the game is terrible, it's just obviously the sequel improved on so much that going back and playing the original felt like a bit of a chore. And as far as the presentation, it still looked impressive for the time it came out. You see, a lot of games back in the early days of the PS3 mostly had this sort of brown filter for some odd reason. It seemed like most developers wanted to go for a more gritty look to their games, but thankfully Naughty Dog took the alternative direction, which helped it stand out a lot more. Let me just add that I am playing the PS4 remaster, so there is quite a bit of a polish to the visuals and performance, but apart from that, the gameplay is pretty much the same as the PS3 version. Which unfortunately means that all the issues I had playing it back then is still present, but we'll get into that later. For now, I just want to focus on the positive side of my experience. See, I was a big fan of the Tomb Raider games growing up, specifically this one right here, and of course these films as well, and the similarities are quite noticeable. You can tell that the later Tomb Raider games took some inspiration from the Uncharted series and then vice versa later on in the fourth entry. And as far as me comparing it to the Mummy series, if you've watched the films then you know what I'm talking about. I always felt that Nathan Drake reminded me of Rick O'Connell, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. Anyway, this game has its highs and lows, and the highs definitely hit hard still. Even with the more frustrating parts of the game, like some of the gunfights for example. Both the music when it kicks in and the dialogue from the enemies when they notice you run out of ammo. He's out of ammo! Or Nathan reacting to what's happening in that moment definitely adds to the experience and make it more tolerable. It's the kind of thing you would expect in games nowadays, but back then it wasn't as common. At least as far as I know. I've got to give a shout out to Greg Edmondson for composing the music in the game. I'm sure I'm not alone in agreeing that the music is pretty much its own character. With all the subtle but prominent musical cues when building up to action-heavy set pieces, or how certain cutscenes are brought to life even further during emotional moments. It all ties them together very well. And of course the brilliant work from the actors that had to wear those mocap suits. And the whole team at Naughty Dog obviously did an amazing job. I don't think it would be right without me stating that. The story wasn't too bad either. It's like your typical action movie, but I think what helped it excel in my opinion was the dialogue between the characters and definitely the music. The visuals are obviously great too. I mean, I can't deny the fact that it clearly aged well. Okay, I think I've said all I can about the positive aspects of the game. Let's get to the negatives now. As I said earlier, the gunfights can be very frustrating, especially coming in from the improvements of the second one. I feel like during the first half of the game, each enemy, regardless of their armor type, take the same amount of hits to go down. Even enemies that don't wear any armor, which is kinda odd, but whatever. Basic enemies usually take about 3 hits before they go down. Like right here, see, I shot this guy 3 times, simple enough, but then a similar looking enemy takes way more hits with an AK. Nah man, that guy should have been dead quick. I thought it was a glitch back then, or that maybe I'm too used to the second game, but I tried it on the same enemy type and it took even more shots. It doesn't make any sense. So obviously at this point I'm getting frustrated, but while using a regular pistol on the same enemy type, this happens. Yeah, might as well stick to using a pistol. Unless you end up finding any of these, the rest are pretty much not as useful in my opinion. This whole section annoyed the hell out of me. Look at this here, I'm aiming forward yet shooting backwards. Yeah, I don't know how either. Now this next part was fine, no issues whatsoever. The puzzles weren't that bad either, not too intrusive and not too over the top. It was a decent way to break up all the gunfights and the climbing sections, so that's all good. But these speedboat sections, holy hell. If you've played this part then you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not going to spend too long on everything or this would be a half an hour video of me complaining and I don't even want to hear that. I will say this though, fuck this part. Oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention the quick time events that occur sometimes. All I'll say is that some games do it well where it feels immersive, but that unfortunately wasn't the case here. It's not terrible, but you do get moments like this part here where it drags on for too long, which seems unnecessary in my opinion. Also, let me clarify that some of these negatives might not seem like a big deal individually, but they all added up and affected my overall experience. And again, I don't think the game is bad for those reasons. I understand that it's the first in the series, so it's bound to have those issues. I mean, even the later games have their own fair share of problems, but let me not delay this section any longer than I already have. Overall, the game was still enjoyable. There were a few things I didn't get to mention. Like the fact that although it's a linear game, there are still some elements of exploration with all the treasures scattered around each chapter. Or how at a certain point it turns into an action horror and surprisingly does a great job in building and maintaining that atmosphere within those moments. I mean, it makes sense since they eventually released this masterpiece. Noticing all the improvements they made in the second game still made me want to play that instead during certain chapters, but luckily the music and the dialogue kept me engaged throughout. I'm definitely going to talk about the other games as well, so feel free to subscribe if you'd like to stay up to date with that. And also, let me know down below if you agree or disagree with anything mentioned in this video, or feel free to share your experience with the game in general. And of course, any feedback is always welcome and appreciated. Anyway, thanks for watching and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.